Welcome or welcome back to A Better Choice Homestead. My name is Kelly and on my channel I focus on food. Today is Sunday, so it's another Sunday Funday where I try to get a whole lot of things done in a short amount of time. Today I am going to be doing a few little projects so I can get them out of the way. I am going to be making another batch of kombucha. I am going to be making some fermented apples, and I'm also going to be rehydrating some freeze-dried sour cream, because I just got home from the store and my son asked, hey, where's the sour cream? But I didn't know we were out. So luckily I do have freeze-dried on hand, and so I'm gonna show you how I reconstitute that. I'm also going to be slicing up a bunch of apples because it is apple season and freeze-dried apples are amazing. So I'm gonna be doing a batch coming up on a Friday video of freeze-dried cinnamon apples. But I first need to get them prepped, and since I'm going to be doing the fermented apples, I'm just going to get those sliced up now as well, get them onto trays, and then I can get them into the freezer. So I think we are going to start with the sour cream. Here is my freeze-dried sour cream. This is all that I have left. I'm sure that I have more in long-term storage, but this is all that I have left in my short-term pantry. So I'm definitely going to be having to keep an eye out for sales on sour cream and get some more freeze-dried, because clearly this comes in super handy. So we are going to just do 2 ounces of sour cream to 3 ounces of water. So it's 1 part of the sour cream to 1.5 parts of the liquid. I've already got the 3 ounces measured out for the water. And now I want to do 2 ounces of the sour cream. And 2. So I can probably do that much more one more time before I am out. So definitely have to keep this on my short-term to-do list. All right, now with this, all I'm gonna do is add water. All right, this still looks pretty dry and powdery on top, and that's okay. We are gonna go in here with the immersion blender. I love having an immersion blender. Let's see how we did. This looks good. I don't see any gritty pieces in here, just because that fat is gonna need some heat to kind of melt it back down in with the rest of the components of the sour cream. I'm just gonna put a lid on it. Super easy. I'm gonna pop this into the refrigerator for about 30 minutes, and then this will be ready to use. I'll show you that when it's in its solid state. This is a reconstitution of freeze-dried food, not a rehydration of freeze-dried food, because the consistency does matter. If you've watched any of my freeze-dried videos and talk about rehydrating versus reconstituting, you rehydrate things like meat or vegetables. You reconstitute things where consistency matters, like soup or this, or mashed potatoes, mashed sweet potatoes, something like that, where the consistency really matters and you want to carefully add water in. Whereas to rehydrate vegetables, meat, something like this, you can put as much water in there as you like. You're not going to drown them. They're not going to explode. They're only going to absorb the amount of water that was lost during the freeze-dry process, leaving the cells completely intact. So the cells are just going to fill right back up. It's only going to take in as much water as it needs. But with something like this, you definitely want to be careful, and it's better to add less water than you think you might need and adjust it as you go. Otherwise, you might end up with a watery mess. All right, let's move on to the next project. We are gonna go ahead and get some kombucha done, and then we're gonna tackle the apples. Today, I'm gonna be making a blueberry kombucha brew. These are just a wider mouth glass bottle with a screw-on lid. They also have these nice cozy jackets that help keep the kombucha in the dark, where it's going to ferment for an extra 3 days on my counter. And then I'll move them to the fridge where they can just be enjoyed at leisure. It's been a little bit since I've made any kombucha because it's been harvest season and there hasn't been any room in my fridge. You have to either consume your kombucha at a certain time, for me it's 3 days, or move it into the refrigerator to slow down the fermentation process. Otherwise, your containers can explode because this just keeps continuing to build up the carbonation, which is what makes it a fizzy brew. So for me, with my temperatures and humidity, 3 days on the second ferment with the fruit or juice or whatever it is you're going to be using, and then you gotta get it in the refrigerator or consume it just to slow that process down. Because kombucha is a fermented food, it is super, super healthy for your gut. It just keeps all those microbes in your gut healthy, and your gut is your immune system, so it helps boost your immunity as well. Plus, who doesn't like a carbonated beverage? I do have a friend who does not like carbonation at all, whereas the only thing I like to drink that's flat is coffee. Otherwise, I really want some bubbles in my drink, some sort of a carbonation. So I really love kombucha, and we love having it on hand at the ready whenever we want it. I typically have 3 jars going at any one time, but because we've slowed down on making that, I'm just gonna focus on 1 right now, and because I'm only gonna get a few bottles out of this jar, I will go ahead and make another brew right away with this. So to get started, I am going to start by adding fruit to the jar. You can use juice if you want to. I like to use whole fruit that I get fresh in season or grow myself. These blueberries did not come from my garden. My plants are still very young. I only got a handful of blueberries this year, and honestly, the birds got to those before I did. But these I got from Azure Standard. I get a lot of my organic produce from Azure Standard. They deliver beautiful product at a really affordable price, super convenient, and I love Azure. How much fruit you add or juice that you add to each jar, and it doesn't have to be just fruit or juice. You can make some sort of a concoction that has turmeric in it or ginger in it, whatever you like. I really like the peach lime ginger. That's my favorite, but I don't have any fresh peaches on hand right now. I did have these blueberries. So how much you add is going to be just dependent on what you like. I'm not the one that consumes the majority of the kombucha in the house. So, a couple times a week for me seems to keep my gut healthy. So I add a little bit more fruit because I'm not the sweets person in the house. So I don't know. I usually a little bit more than that, and I'll show you how much that. Maybe see a little bit. Yep, that looks about good. So just maybe 1.5 inches on the bottom of the jar, but it's totally up to you. Add as much as you like. That is the fun. That is the beauty of making things in your own kitchen. You get to get creative. You get to use the ingredients that you like. You get to use the spices and the herbs that you like. You get to do things your way. You get to take recipes and make them your own. Start your own traditions. Traditions are so important to family and just life in general. I'm gonna be using a wooden spoon in here. You don't wanna introduce metal to your kombucha. The SCOBY does not like that, and the SCOBY is what is alive in there, and it is what is creating all that beautiful bacterial and enzymes that make this super healthy for you. These blueberries froze very well, by the way. I did put them into a food saver bag. I don't even remember. These might have been from last year, a year ago, and they are still firm and lovely. And I do like, when I'm using whole fruit, I definitely do like to use the wider mouth jars, just because it's a lot easier to get the beverage and the food out of the jar when you're ready to consume it. All right, so here's our SCOBY, and it's not gross, it's not slimy or anything like that. It is just a SCOBY. which is the living, breathing part of this brew. And every time you make a brew, you make another little layer of this mother SCOBY. It just forms in layers, and when you're ready to divide, either to start a new jar, give some to a friend, compost, freeze dry for later, you can just peel off, you know, the amount that you want because it just comes apart in layers. So that's a SCOBY. You can buy this on Amazon. You can, or a health food store. Ask a friend and see if they have one available if you're interested in making kombucha. You definitely want to stir the bottom of the container before you start pouring it off. I did already pour one. And then you're just going to pour off as much as you want to use, but you need to maintain about 2 cups in the bottom of your jar, enough to cover your SCOBY completely. And you want to stir that stuff up from the bottom because it is the stuff on the bottom that is what is going to react with the fruit in your consumable jars. It's actually the stuff that's going to feed on the fruit in your consumable jars, which is what's going to make this an incredibly carbonated beverage. And then I'm just going to carefully pour this into my container up to about the shoulders. Because this is going to start building gases as the bacteria is feeding on the fruit down here, and as it feeds on the fruit, the waste of that feed is the carbonation. So this allows me about 3 days worth of carbonation production before there's too much buildup in my jar. So I fill it to about the shoulders and I can leave it on the counter for 3 days, and after that it's got to go into the refrigerator. A little more and we'll see how much I want to leave in the jar. You could, maybe should, measure out 2 cups to set aside. I just eyeball it as long as my SCOBY is completely covered. Get that covered back up. We'll get this guy filled. Looks great. Just poured it in the jar, use a little bit less blueberry. And we will go ahead and get started on another brew of this, because this needs 1 to 2 weeks to ferment like this on the counter before you can do the second brew with the fruit. Here is the one where I poured the juice in. Look how colorful and lovely that looks. It looks delicious. And here is the one where we just have the blueberries in it. This one also, to me, looks really scrumptious and yummy. These are gonna be thoroughly enjoyed. So there's 5 bottles of kombucha for us to enjoy in 3 days' time. All right, to make the tea to refill the kombucha, I am starting with 2 cups of filtered water. Filtered water is important if you have any chance of chlorine, fluoride, or other things in your water, because the SCOBY is not gonna like that. So I'm gonna get this turned on high. And once this comes to a boil, we're going to just steep some tea bags. I'm using Lipton, that's what I have on hand. I purchased a whole lot of Lipton at one point, and I'm still going through all of those. And for every 2 cups of tea that you brew, you're gonna use 8 tea bags. So talk about an inexpensive way to have a carbonated beverage. This is going to fill that whole jar up, and you saw that I got 5 bottles, so 5 pops, if you will. out of the cost of 8 tea bags, some filtered water, and whatever you want to use to flavor in your second brew. So I know I've shown this once before a long time ago. A long time ago. How long could it have been? All right, so I just hold the tea bags together like this. And then I'm going to pull off the little strings like so. And then just knot the ends together. It just makes it really easy to get the tea bags in and out of the pot without getting burned by hot water. So I can just set these aside for a minute while this comes up to a boil. I've only done kombucha with black tea. That's what I use. I know that there is a way you can do it with green tea, as long as it's caffeinated. You don't want decaf because the SCOBY does feed on the caffeine in the tea. So make sure it has caffeine. With the water boiling, I can go ahead and get my tea bags in. So I'm just gonna drop them in, and I'm gonna keep the knotted end over the side of the pan. So I can just hold it on with this. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the heat, and I'm just gonna let this steep for 10 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and take this lid off. And now I can put the sugar in and take the tea bags out. Now the tea bags have still a lot of moisture in them, which is the tea. I don't wanna take them completely out just yet. I also don't wanna squeeze them because I don't wanna get any of the contents of the tea bags into the tea. So I just lift them out of the water. I'll just stick the end of this string through the little hole in the handle, and that will usually hold them in place to drip dry. And then I can add 1 cup of sugar. So 2 cups of tea, 8 tea bags, steep it for 10 minutes, then add 1 cup of sugar, which seems like a lot of sugar, I know, but it's gonna go into a whole gallon of kombucha. And you're not gonna be consuming this sugar. The bacteria in the kombucha is going to be consuming it. So I'm gonna stir this with a wooden spoon. It doesn't have to be wooden at this point. I'm just using the same one. Once this is introduced to the kombucha, you want it to be wooden. But I'm just gonna stir it until this is fully dissolved. And then we are just gonna let this sit until it comes to room temperature. And then we're gonna add it back to the jar, fill the rest of the jar up with some water. It's that easy to make kombucha. Super, super simple. I mentioned that you can get the kombucha starter kit in a health food store or on Amazon. And when you do, it's like in a bag, or at least when I bought it, it came in a bag. And in the bag was the mother SCOBY and the tea. The tea that's in there represents the 2 cups that you reserve to keep with your SCOBY at all times. And then you start with making this tea the way I'm doing it now and add that to your jar with your starter kit, which again is the mother SCOBY and the 2 cups of tea. I am going to set this aside and just forget about it for an hour or so while we move on to the apples. So I did go to the farmer's market this morning and picked up some beautiful Honeycrisp apples. So that's what we're going to be using for this little project here. And of course I've got more apples to do for the cinnamon apples for the freeze dryer. But we're going to start with just 4 apples. I think that will be enough. I've got 2 kind of large, a medium and a small. I think that will fill 1 quart-sized jar very, very well. So this is a lacto fermentation project, very similar to the kombucha. And the whole process of lacto fermentation is to convert the sugar that is in the foods over to lactic acid, which lowers the acidity level in the product, forcing the air out, which is what causes the carbonation, but it also makes for a very anaerobic environment where the bad bacteria cannot grow, where the good bacteria, which are super healthy for your gut, can thrive and populate. So this is going to be a nice little treat to have on hand. This doesn't take long at all. There are so many sugars in this, plus I'm gonna steal about a tablespoon from my kombucha jar to jumpstart this. And this should be ready in just about 2 days or so. We'll check it just to be sure, and I'll show you what that looks like as we progress through the next couple of days. And then I'll put this in the refrigerator. I'll just put it in the door of my refrigerator because that's the warmest spot in the refrigerator. And I'll be able to enjoy that anywhere from a month to 2 months. and I can use that in smoothies, on the top of waffles, or in a salad, wherever you might like some apples. Of course, it does change the flavor just a bit, but they're delicious, and they provide you with a better immunity because it's feeding your gut, and your gut is your immune system. So I'm gonna get these peeled and roughly chopped, and I just have one of those apple cutters here that takes the core out and slices it into some wedges. And I am gonna be peeling the apple for this, and I will likely save all of my cores and peels to do something else with. So before moving on to the rest of the apples, I will get a compost bowl to put all of these cores and such in. We'll probably save those and do something else with them to limit the amount of waste. Food is so incredibly expensive today. I went to the grocery store this morning. I did not get a ton of stuff, but it was over $300. I went to the farmer's market. I actually did not spend a whole lot of money there. I got these apples. The apples were $30. Probably could have saved some money by going and picking them myself, but I did not have the time for that. And we have such amazing farmers at my local farmer's market. Our farmer's market is quite large, and I think it's 86 years old. They've been having the farmer's market here, and there are so many incredible farmers, even Amish. The food is incredible. Not all of it is organic. You do have to ask. I also picked up a couple stalks of Brussels sprouts. I do have Brussels sprouts in my garden, but there is no way they are going to form up before the plant dies back. We'll see. But I do plan on harvesting some leaves from that soon. What else did I get at the farmer's market? Oh, peppers. So I did my garden peppers in a freeze-dry method that I showed on my Freeze-Dry Friday. Sauteed peppers and onions, and I am obsessed with that. It is so good, so phenomenal. So I specifically went to the farmer's market today to see if anybody had any late season peppers that I could snag, because I want to do a whole bunch more of those. And I was able to get a bushel of sweet peppers for $10, and I was able to get about a half a bushel, maybe a little bit more than that, of various hot peppers. I got hot Hungarians, I got serranos, I got some more jalapenos, and that was about $20. And then I did go out and pick the rest of my peppers this week too, and in there I have some mix of both some sweet and some hot, but it wasn't very much. I am utterly impressed and addicted to those freeze-dried sauteed peppers and onions. So I am going to be dedicating a whole lot of freeze dryer time to those this coming up week to make sure that I can get through all of them before they go bad. All right, so with these peeled, I'm just going to do a rough chop on them. So fermented food is so important to your overall health. You'll notice a huge difference in how you feel, even just after a couple of days of introducing fermented food. And if you do end up doing the kombucha, then these apples will ferment for you super quick, because you'll be using a starter fermented liquid like I'm going to today. And the more little things that you can build up for your overall health in your kitchen, the easier it becomes over time. If you don't have a fermentation lid, and this is just one type of fermentation lid, if you don't have that, that's okay. You can use just a regular lid on here. Just be sure that you're burping it twice a day to let some of that air out. All right, so to this quart-sized jar, I am going to add a teaspoon of salt. Salt is important for the fermentation process. You definitely want salt. I am going to be adding a couple of cinnamon sticks in here. These are smaller sticks, that's why I'm adding 2. You could use a teaspoon of cinnamon if you'd like, or if you have the larger sticks, you can just use one. I am also going to be adding the juice of 1 lemon. And basically the juice of 1 lemon is typically equal to about a tablespoon. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. And then I am going to add about a tablespoon of my starter, which is from my kombucha jar. So I have a 1 tablespoon measure here, but this is metal. And remember, you don't want to put anything metal in with your mother SCOBY. So I'm going to just fish out a little bit of this tea and measure out a tablespoon. And pour that in. And then all I'm gonna do in here, it's got the salt, it's got the cinnamon, it's got the lemon juice, and now it has the kombucha tea, which is the fermentation starter. I'm just going to fill this up with some filtered water. And I use a Berkey to filter my water. I have a 2.5 gallon Berkey. I know not everybody likes the Berkey. I love it. I think it makes amazing tasting water. All right, I filled it almost up to the top, leaving a little bit of room so that the gases have a way to escape without this bubbling over. It might still bubble over, and that's okay. I am just going to put this on a plate to catch it just in case it does. And I'm also going to put the lid on it now. And what a fermentation lid does is it just allows the gases to escape. It even allows the ferment to bubble up, at least on this model, up into this top here without it spilling everywhere. So the gas can escape, but nothing is going to get in, especially any of those little tiny fungus gnats. So let me give you a good look at this, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill a small jar, and then we are going to move on to the larger apples that we need to get onto trays. All right, so there's our jar. Here's our lid. This is just a screw-on lid. This piece sits down inside the liquid, and the gas can escape up through there, up into this top piece, and then this little top piece has little tiny holes over it. So everything can escape out of the top, but nothing is going to get in. Even if something does get into here, there's a second chamber in here just to help prevent anything that could contaminate your ferment. So this is only going to take probably 3 days on the counter. So before I end this video, I will be sure to bring you back for that, show you what this looks like, give it a taste before I put it into the refrigerator. But this is health in a jar. All right, so here is the pint-size jar that I filled up. It's got the same ingredients, just half as much. I used bottled lemon juice in here. And here is my setup for the fermentation. So first is a lid. This one's metal. It does have a rubber gasket on the inside. It has a hole in the middle with a rubber gasket going through the hole. This little piece is going to go through that hole until it's up at the top. And then it's got this little piece here that goes in the center of this, because there's a center piece in here. And so this fits right over that. It kind of caps that, but it does allow for spillage inside of here for things to bubble. And then the last piece is this little topper that has little holes around the edge on the outside, and that just snaps right on top. And so this is just gonna go over the top of that. And this is just gonna sit for 3 days. So about the same time that my kombucha is done, this will be ready as well. I'm gonna get the rest of the apples going. I'm putting the cores and the scraps in here because I have decided that I am gonna make some apple cider vinegar with this. So that's what we're gonna do today as well. I don't know how many apples I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do just enough to fill 4 trays for now because apples will store for a little bit. Over here, I have a bowl of just some water from the tap. I'm gonna add a little bottled lemon juice to that. And that's just gonna prevent the apples from browning before I get them into the freezer. For now, I'm gonna get these apples peeled. These are a great hit with everybody. They are a delicious snack, and they go quick. I don't think I have any of these in storage because people snag them. They ask for them. If they know I have them, they'll, just ask, hey, can I have a bag of apples? Which is fine. I love sharing, and especially really healthy, delicious treats like this. But I am making a more concentrated effort to make sure that I have a variety of foods in my long-term storage. So that's what these are going to be for. These I'm just slicing, maybe 1/4 of an inch thick on the outside, of course thinner towards the core area. Having long-term food storage just brings me tremendous peace of mind for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, I want to know that I have some amazing food options, healthy food options, in case I'm out of work for an extended period of time again because of health reasons. I think the longest I was out of work before was 6 months, and it made it really challenging. I didn't really have anybody to go to the grocery store for me. It was well before the Uber Eats and the DoorDashes and the Grubhubs and the things like that. And it made it really challenging. Also from a cost perspective, when you are out of work for that long, you don't have income coming in, you don't have a lot of money to spend on food. So it was a challenging time in my life, and I wanna make sure that I will not be in that situation again, even though I know I'm going to be having more surgeries sometime in my future. So I'm preparing for that. Also, because we saw what happened during 2020 when the grocery store shelves became bare and food items were hard to get. I don't like that feeling either. We continue to see issues in our supply chain. I work in sales, and I see the lead times growing or staying for long periods of time on certain goods, and I don't want to run the risk of not being able to get my hands on food, especially food that I can't grow myself. It's also a good peace of mind measure for 20, 25, 30 years from now when I will be retired, knowing that I have healthy, delicious, and nutritious food available to me when my means of working and making money changes. So many, many different reasons why I like to preserve food, grow food, and show people how to use the foods, and all different types of foods that bring a variety of different health benefits to your body. Okay, I've only got 5 apples left here out of the first bag. I still have the second bag still untouched, but my bowl of apples and my bowl of apple scraps is getting kind of full. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some of these apples onto some freeze dryer trays. I've got some cinnamon that I'm gonna be sprinkling over the top of them. They are so good that way. I don't know that I did apples last year. I think I did so many of them the year before that I just didn't do them last year, maybe. It's hard to know because I wasn't filming back then. That is another plus for filming, is you get to a record of what you do and don't do, what you like and don't like. So it's one of the reasons that I am happy to be filming. Do a light sprinkle here. Those look great. I just set those aside, and I'm just gonna keep going with the trays until this bowl is empty, and then I will slice up some more apples and keep going. Anytime you can add an ingredient that boosts your health and tastes good at the same time is just a win-win in my opinion. All right, I've got a little bit more slicing to do, so I'm gonna get back to that. I will bring you back when all the trays are filled and we're gonna get back to that kombucha. And I'll give you a look at the completed trays as well, but we're not gonna do those on this video. That's gonna be for a freeze-dry Friday. We've got our apples ready to go into the freezer, and once they are fully frozen, oh, smell amazing. That's a lot of what's going to be freeze-dried cinnamon apple slices. So I'm just gonna set these out of the way and we are gonna finish making this kombucha brew. This is what's considered the first ferment. We've got the 2 cups of reserved tea as well as the SCOBY that is in here. I'm gonna be adding the tea here that we made. I'm just gonna take those tea bags off the side here. They have fully dried, they're no longer wet, so this is completely ready to go in. And then from there, I'm just going to get this filled with some filtered water from the Berkey. So let me get that. I'm just gonna bring it over 4 cups at a time. That's the easiest way to get it dispensed out of my Berkey. So that's plenty. So 8 cups plus the 2 that were in here, that's 10 cups. And this is right about at the shoulders of the jar, which is perfect. You don't want it too full. SCOBY is going to get to the top of this liquid here. So right now it's just kind of floating down here, but it will eventually settle up towards the top of the jar. At least it usually does. And at which time the bacteria in here is going to be feeding on that sugar and creating that carbonated byproduct, and it's going to bubble up a little bit, so you want it to have enough space to do that without getting your covering wet, which is certainly going to invite pests. So this is now just going to go sit in the corner, which is where I put my ferments for 1 to 2 weeks. I typically like it at 2 weeks, and at the 2-week point, I will probably divide my SCOBY again and get another jar started. But that's it for that. So I still need to show you the end result on the fermented apples. I've already lost one of the kombucha bottles that I made. Somebody has already absconded with one. So I am down now to 4. Hopefully in the 3-day period of time, there will be some left that I can show you what that looks like, but it's gonna look the same as it did when it went into the jar, except it's going to have a little bit more fizz around the top. What I'm gonna do with these apples is I am going to put these in a jar. 1 gallon of apple scraps in here that is going to turn into apple scrap vinegar. So I'm just gonna get a cover on this with a rubber band, put this over on my counter, and I'll give you an update on this and next steps on this when we come back for the fermented apples. All right, to finish off the apples and to make the apple scrap vinegar, I have filtered water. This is 4 cups, and for every 1 cup of water, I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of sugar, and I'm using cane sugar rather than the white bleached table sugar. Now, this is not gonna dissolve as well as white sugar, but that's okay. We are looking for the lactobacillus bacteria that is naturally on food kind of everywhere, just to start feeding on this sugar and break it down. That's the lactofermentation process. And as it feeds on this sugar, it's going to create lactic acid, and that is what is going to make this into vinegar. First, it's going to turn these apples into apple wine, and then it is going to continue to ferment and turn it into a vinegar. And that is going to take anywhere from probably 1 to 3 months. It really depends on the humidity level, the temperature, all of that. So I am going to stir this up one more time because I want to make sure I get all of that sugar in the jar. And we're going to fill that up one more time. that looks good. So I just came up to with water to about the first lip here on the jar. And now we want to weigh this down. If you don't, that's okay. You might get some mold on top of the jar. So I do have a fermentation weight, but clearly this is smaller than the opening here. So some water in this bag, and I'm just gonna lay that on top. That is going to help weigh it down. Some of this liquid is gonna spill out, that's okay, but let me get a towel just so it doesn't go everywhere. I've got my little iPad right over here, so I wanna make sure we don't get any water down that way. And then I'm gonna put the fermentation weight right on top, push down just a little bit, and make sure that everything is submerged. And that's it. Now I'm gonna cover this back up. We want it to breathe. So we want a way for the air to go in and out. And so I'm just using some cloth here, some cheesecloth, and a tight rubber band to make sure that no fungus gnats or anything else that's gonna be really attracted to this can get in. And there you go. Pretty soon we will have some vinegar, and this can be used for just about anything you would use vinegar for, except for canning. That has to be a certain percentage of vinegar. So you can use this as a cleaning agent. You can use this in laundry as a fabric softener. You can use this in tea or other beverages. You can use it in your cooking. You can use it in your baking. And it is absolutely free because all of these were just scraps that I was gonna throw away. So this should be a beautiful addition to my kitchen, and I'm sure that we'll be using this on some upcoming videos. All right, let's take a look at this sour cream. Oh, yeah, that looks good. That looks great. It is thick, it is creamy, it is not gritty. Look at that. That is sour cream reconstituted. All right, we're back with all of our ferments. It's been almost 5 days. So I know that I said I was gonna do this in 3 because of the apples, but it's been a week. I had a death in the family, and it's also been crazy at work, and I took a couple days just to take a moment. So let's start with the kombucha. So this is the first ferment. As I mentioned, the SCOBY has floated back up to the top. Mine usually does. It doesn't matter if it's in the bottom. It doesn't matter if it is, crosswise in here. It just matters that you're keeping this clean. No bugs can get in here. And this is just going to sit on my counter for probably 2 weeks before I do anything with it, although this can sit on your counter for a whole lot longer than that. I have let this go for probably 6 or 8 weeks. It's just very, very sweet tea. It's just black tea, filtered water, and sugar, and it gets fermented over time. So it starts to smell a little bit vinegary the longer you let it sit. If you get it between 1 and 2 weeks, it's just gonna be sweet tea that has a whole lot of good bacteria in here that is good for your gut and your overall health. So he's just gonna go back on the shelf. Then we have the making of our apple scrap vinegar. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the lid off on here. I don't know if you can see, clearly not a lot is gonna be going on with this yet. This takes a month or 2, but there are some bubbles at the top, so we know that it is doing what it needs to do. And I am gonna go ahead and give it, there's a whole bunch of bubbles that just came up there. I'm gonna go ahead and give it its stir. So I'm going to, with clean hands, I'm going to take out the weight that I have here, kind of holding it down, as well as that bag. And it looks like everything has stayed under the liquid level. So not quite so important to make sure that we're getting it stirred. Stirring it is more so, and look at all of those bubbles. I don't know if you can see those, but there are a lot of bubbles. So this is doing what it needs to do. It's more important to keep stirring it just to be sure the apples stay in the liquid. All right, that's why you're stirring it. Because if the apples get above that liquid, you could develop mold. And depending on the type of mold you develop, you may want to restart. If it's just like a white mold and you can just scoop it off the top, it's fine to leave it. If it's green or black or blue or something like that, then you probably want to start over. But if you can keep your apples or whatever you're fermenting under the liquid level, then you're not going to be dealing with mold, especially if you started with clean stuff, clean hands, clean jar, anything that's going into here was clean when you started. So this guy is just going to go back on my shelf. I'll keep an eye on him, stir if needed, and we should be able to strain him in probably 3 or 4 weeks and then just let him continue to ferment, but without the peels and the apples. I'll do that on a Sunday video so you can see. And then we have our kombucha. I do still have 4 bottles, so only one was consumed. And this is not much to look at. I mean, if I shake it, you can see clearly there's a lot of bubbles in here. This is just going to be delicious. So you can see barely that there's fruit down here at the bottom. Everything has mixed in really well. And this is going to be just an amazing, refreshing drink that is gut healthy for you as well. So those are now in my fridge. I took them out to show you this video. I did put them in there after 3 days. Don't forget to do that. Please don't forget to do that. Exploding glass is very, very dangerous. And then we have our apples. Now this guy right here, he is super active. He has been bubbling. You can see that it has a lot of liquid up here in the top, and he is just super active. So we're gonna get him put into the fridge today. So we're gonna open this and give him a taste. This one doesn't have anything up here in the lid, but that's okay. I can see that there are a lot of bubbles, a lot of effervescence in here. So it's doing its thing. It's just not to the point where it is bringing anything up. I don't know why, but that is perfectly fine. The difference between the 2 jars, this was fresh lemon, this was lemon juice. That was the only difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the fermenting lids on these. And I'm gonna get these washed up and put away. We don't need those anymore. And when I put this into the refrigerator, I'm just gonna use one of these lids here. And again, this is gonna go into the door of my refrigerator because that's the warmest part of the refrigerator. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. And you can see those are just beautiful looking apples in there. So let's give a try to both of these jars of apples and see if there's a difference based on the lemon juice and the fact that this one doesn't have any liquid covering the apples anymore because a lot of the liquid came up here into the lid, and this one is still fully covering the apples. Let's see how these apples taste. So this is from the big jar. Yeah, those are good. They are still sweet. Honeycrisp are sweet apples. They have a little bit of a tang to them. It's not vinegary at all, just a little bit of a tang, and they're soft. They're almost like cooked apples, but not quite. Let me try one from the smaller jar. Same thing. I'm not tasting much of the cinnamon, just a tiny, tiny bit. They're delicious. As I mentioned, these are going to be excellent in baked goods, in oatmeal, on waffles, on top of salads, anywhere you might want some apples. It's also going to be good just to take a couple of pieces in the morning, kind of just to get your day going, feed your gut. We are right at the beginning of winter where cold, flu, and other viruses are kind of rampant, and anything you can do to keep your gut healthy, which keeps your immune system up, I think is a good idea. Fermenting is really, really easy. There's not a whole lot to it. So if you would like to see more fermented things, or if you would like me to do a specific fermented thing, go ahead and leave me a comment down below and I will get to that for you. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Sunday Funday. My name is Kelly, you're at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you come back and visit again soon.